Sarah Martinez stared at her reflection in the bathroom mirror of the downtown hotel. Her dark hair was slightly messy, her lipstick had long since worn off, and her eyes held a mixture of excitement and uncertainty. She couldn't believe what she was about to do. At 28, she had always been the responsible one among her friends, the one who planned ahead, who never took risks, who always played it safe. Tonight was different. The hotel bar buzzed with Friday evening energy. Business travelers mingled with locals, creating a sophisticated atmosphere that made Sarah feel both nervous and exhilarated. She had come here with her best friend Emma, who was currently flirting with a tall man near the piano. Emma had practically dragged Sarah out tonight, insisting she needed to stop wallowing about her recent breakup with Derek, her boyfriend of 3 years. "You need to live a little," Emma had said earlier that evening. "When was the last time you did something spontaneous? Something just for you?" Sarah couldn't remember. Her life had been a series of careful decisions and planned outcomes. College, then her marketing degree, then her steady job at a mid-sized advertising firm. Even her relationship with Derek had been predictable and safe. Too safe, as it turned out. He had broken up with her 6 weeks ago, claiming they had grown apart, and that he needed space to figure out what he wanted in life. Now, sitting at the hotel bar with a glass of wine she had been nursing for the past hour, Sarah watched the crowd around her. Everyone seemed so confident, so sure of themselves. She envied their ease, their ability to strike up conversations with strangers, their willingness to take chances. "You look like you're thinking too hard about something." The voice came from beside her, smooth and warm with a hint of amusement. Sarah turned to see a man sliding onto the bar stool next to hers. He was attractive in an understated way, with dark hair that looked like he had run his fingers through it, intelligent blue eyes, and a smile that seemed genuine rather than practiced. He wore a well-fitted navy blazer over dark jeans, striking the perfect balance between professional and casual. "Sorry, I don't mean to intrude," he continued when Sarah didn't respond immediately. "I just noticed you've been sitting here for a while, and you look like you're wrestling with some major life decision." Sarah felt her cheeks warm. "Is it that obvious?" "Only to someone who spends a lot of time doing the same thing," he replied with a self-deprecating laugh. "I'm Alex, by the way. Alex Chun." "Sarah," she said, accepting his offered handshake. His grip was firm but gentle, and she noticed he had nice hands, the kind that suggested he worked with them but took care of them too. "So what's the big decision, Sarah? If you don't mind me asking." Something about his manner put her at ease. Maybe it was the way he wasn't trying too hard to impress her, or how he seemed genuinely interested in her answer rather than just using it as a pickup line. "My friend dragged me out tonight to help me get over a breakup. She thinks I need to be more spontaneous, take more risks." "And what do you think?" Sarah considered the question seriously. "I think she might be right. I've spent my whole life playing it safe, and where has it gotten me? Single, stuck in a routine, watching other people live interesting lives while I observe from the sidelines." Alex nodded thoughtfully. "I know the feeling. I just moved here for a new job, actually. Left everything familiar behind to take a chance on something different. It's terrifying and exciting at the same time." "What kind of work do you do?" Sarah found herself genuinely curious about this stranger who had appeared at exactly the right moment. "Business development," he said vaguely. "Lots of travel, lots of meetings, lots of trying to convince people to take chances on new ideas." "What about you?" "Marketing. Though nothing as exciting as your job sounds. I spend most of my time behind a computer, working on campaigns for local businesses." "That sounds more creative than what I do. At least you get to come up with ideas that people see and interact with. My work is mostly spreadsheets and presentations." They talked easily for the next 2 hours. Alex had a way of listening that made Sarah feel like the most interesting person in the room. He asked follow-up questions, remembered details she had mentioned earlier, and shared stories about his own experiences that were funny without being boastful. She learned that he had grown up in Seattle, that he loved hiking and cooking, and that he was terrible at keeping plants alive despite his best efforts. Sarah found herself relaxing in a way she hadn't in months. The conversation flowed naturally from topic to topic. They discussed travel, sharing stories about favorite trips and places they hoped to visit someday. Alex had been to Thailand and described the floating markets with such vivid detail that Sarah could almost smell the spices and hear the vendors calling out. She told him about her trip to Ireland during college, how she had spent a week driving around the countryside, staying in different bed and breakfasts each night. That sounds amazing, Alex said, and totally spontaneous for someone who claims to always play it safe. That was different, Sarah protested. I had just graduated, and my parents insisted I take a trip before starting my job. They practically forced me to be adventurous. So you're capable of spontaneity when properly encouraged, Alex observed with a grin. As the evening progressed, Sarah became increasingly aware of the chemistry between them. It wasn't just physical attraction, though she definitely found Alex appealing. It was the way he made her laugh, how comfortable she felt talking to him, the spark of intellectual connection she hadn't felt with anyone in a long time. Not even with Derek, if she was being honest with herself. When Emma appeared at Sarah's elbow around 11 o'clock, slightly tipsy and grinning widely, Sarah was surprised at how quickly the time had passed. There you are, Emma exclaimed. I've been looking for you. Are you ready to go? Or are you? She looked meaningfully at Alex, raising an eyebrow. Sarah felt her face flush. She looked at Alex, who was watching her with an unreadable expression. I should probably go, she said reluctantly. It's getting late, and I have some errands to run tomorrow. Of course, Alex said easily. I'm glad I got to meet you, Sarah. This was really nice. He stood as she gathered her purse, ever the gentleman. For a moment, they just looked at each other, and Sarah felt the weight of possibility hanging in the air between them. She could walk away now, go home with Emma, and this would just be a pleasant memory of an evening when she had talked to an interesting stranger. Or she could take the risk Emma had been encouraging her to take. Actually, Sarah heard herself say before she could second-guess the decision, I'm not quite ready to call it a night. Emma, would you be okay getting home without me? Emma's eyes widened with surprise and delight. Are you sure? Sarah looked at Alex again. He wasn't pressuring her, wasn't even suggesting she stay. He was just waiting, letting her make her own choice. I'm sure. Text me when you get home, Emma said, squeezing Sarah's hand. And have fun. After Emma left, Alex and Sarah moved to a quieter corner of the bar. They ordered another round of drinks and continued talking. But now there was an undercurrent of anticipation that hadn't been there before. Sarah was acutely aware of every time Alex's hand brushed hers when he reached for his glass, every time he leaned closer to hear her over the background music. I have to admit, Alex said around midnight, I'm not usually the type to approach women in hotel bars. But there was something about you that I couldn't ignore. What do you mean? Sarah asked, genuinely curious. You looked like you were at a crossroads, he said thoughtfully. Like you were deciding between who you've always been and who you might become. I've been in that exact same place recently, so I recognized it. His words struck a chord with Sarah. That was exactly how she felt, like she was standing at the edge of something new and uncertain. And what did you decide? About who you wanted to become? I decided to stop being afraid of taking chances, Alex said, his voice dropping lower. I decided that playing it safe might be comfortable, but it's not really living. The conversation had taken on a charged quality that made Sarah's
Are you sure
heart
about
race.
this?
She
Yes,
could
I'm
feel
certain.
herself
We need to move
approaching
forward.
another decision
But what if
point,
it doesn't work
another
out?
moment
We'll
where she
handle it
could
then.
choose safety or risk. Alex seemed to sense it too, because he reached across the table and gently touched her hand. I should probably mention, he said quietly, that I'm staying here tonight. In the hotel, I mean. I have a room upstairs. It wasn't quite a proposition, but it wasn't not one either. He was giving her information and letting her decide what to do with it. Sarah appreciated that he wasn't being pushy or presumptuous. He was offering her a choice without pressure. Sarah felt her pulse quicken. She had never done anything like this before. She had never even considered a one-night stand, had always believed in taking relationships slowly, building trust over time. But sitting here with Alex, feeling more alive and desired than she had in years, those old rules seemed arbitrary and limiting. I've never done anything like this before, she admitted quietly. Neither have I, actually, Alex replied, and she believed him. But sometimes the best experiences come from doing things we've never done before. Sarah took a deep breath. She thought about Emma's words about living a little, about taking risks. She thought about Derek and how safe and predictable their relationship had been, and how ultimately unfulfilling that safety had proved to be. She thought about the woman she had been 6 hours ago, sitting in her apartment on a Friday night, watching Netflix, and feeling sorry for herself. That woman seemed like a stranger now. Okay, she said, the word coming out steadier than she felt. Let's go upstairs. Alex's room was on the 15th floor, with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a stunning view of the city lights below. Sarah walked to the window while Alex hung up his jacket, needing a moment to process what she was doing. The city spread out beneath them, thousands of lights twinkling like stars, each one representing someone else's life, someone else's choices and decisions. It's beautiful, she said when Alex joined her at the window. It is, he agreed. But when she glanced at him, he was looking at her rather than the view. What happened next felt both inevitable and surprising. Alex reached up to brush a strand of hair from her face, and the gentle touch sent shivers down her spine. When he leaned in to kiss her, Sarah met him halfway, feeling like she was finally stepping into her own life instead of just observing it. The kiss was soft at first, tentative, giving her room to change her mind. But Sarah didn't want to change her mind. She deepened the kiss, letting herself get lost in the sensation of being desired, of being present in her own body in a way she hadn't been in months. They moved slowly, savoring each moment. Alex was patient and attentive, checking in with her, making sure she was comfortable. There was none of the awkwardness Sarah had expected. Instead, there was a surprising sense of connection, of two people choosing to be vulnerable with each other in the most intimate way possible. Afterward, they lay tangled in the hotel's crisp white sheets, talking quietly about everything and nothing. Alex traced lazy patterns on Sarah's shoulder while she listened to his heartbeat gradually slow back to normal. She felt different somehow, like she had shed an old version of herself and stepped into something new. I should probably go, Sarah said eventually, though she made no move to leave. You should do whatever feels right to you, Alex replied. But you're welcome to stay if you want. Sarah considered her options. She could leave now, go home to her empty apartment, and her predictable life. Or she could stay a little longer in this bubble they had created, where she was brave and spontaneous and desired. She stayed. They talked until the early hours of the morning, sharing stories about their childhoods, their dreams, their fears. Alex told her about the pressure he felt to succeed in his new job, how he sometimes worried he had made a mistake leaving everything familiar behind. Sarah opened up about how she had always felt like she was living someone else's idea of what her life should be, how the breakup with Derek had forced her to confront how little of her life actually belonged to her. Maybe that's not such a bad thing, Alex suggested. Maybe it's an opportunity to figure out what you actually want, rather than what you think you should want. As dawn began to lighten the sky outside the hotel windows, Sarah realized she didn't regret her choice. She felt more like herself than she had in years, even though she was lying naked in bed with a man she had just met. Or maybe because of it. When they finally fell asleep, Sarah's last thought was that she was grateful to Emma for dragging her out tonight. For the first time in months, she was excited to see what came next, even though she had no idea what that might be. She woke up alone. At first, Sarah was disoriented, unsure of where she was or why the sheets smelled like expensive hotel detergent instead of her usual fabric softener. Then, the memories of the night before came flooding back, bringing with them a complex mixture of satisfaction, embarrassment, and disappointment. Alex was gone. His clothes were gone from the chair where he had draped them the night before. The only sign that he had been there at all was the faint indent in the pillow next to hers, and the lingering scent of his cologne. Sarah sat up in bed, pulling the sheet around herself, and looked around the room. There was no note, no indication of where he had gone or whether he planned to return. She checked her phone and saw that it was just past 8 in the morning. She had slept for maybe 3 hours. For a moment, she felt the familiar urge to spiral into self-recrimination. She had made a mistake, been too impulsive, trusted too quickly. This was exactly why she usually played it safe, why she took things slowly and built relationships on solid foundations rather than physical attraction and good conversation. But then, she stopped herself. She had made a choice last night, an adult choice with a man who had been honest with her about what this was. He hadn't promised her anything beyond the night they had shared, and she hadn't asked for any promises. She had no right to feel disappointed that he hadn't turned into something more than what it had been. Still, as she gathered her clothes and Prepared to take the walk of shame back to her apartment, Sarah couldn't help feeling a little hollow. Not because she regretted what they had done, but because it had felt like the beginning of something rather than a complete experience in itself. She dressed quickly and took the elevator down to the lobby, keeping her head high despite the knowing looks from the hotel staff. Let them think what they wanted to think. She was a grown woman who had made her own choices, and she refused to be ashamed of that. The taxi ride home gave her time to think about what the night had meant to her. She had proven to herself that she was capable of spontaneity, of taking risks, of stepping outside her comfort zone. She had shared an amazing connection with someone, even if it had been temporary. Most importantly, she had remembered what it felt like to want something and go after it, rather than waiting for life to happen to her. By the time she reached her apartment, Sarah had decided to view the experience as a positive one, regardless of how it had ended. She had learned something important about herself, and that was worth more than a phone number or a promise to call. She spent the weekend telling herself this story, reinforcing it with each retelling. When Emma called for details, Sarah focused on how empowered she felt, how glad she was that she had taken the risk. When her sister called and sensed something different in her voice, Sarah talked about how she was learning to put herself first for once. By Monday morning, Sarah had almost convinced herself that she was completely fine with how things had turned out. She was a new version of herself, someone who took chances and lived in the moment. Someone who could have amazing one-night stands without needing them to turn into something more. She dressed carefully for work, choosing an outfit that reflected her newfound confidence. A fitted black dress that she had always thought was too bold, heels that made her feel powerful, makeup that emphasized her eyes. She felt different walking into her office building, like she was carrying a secret that made her more interesting than everyone else rushing to catch the elevator. The feeling lasted exactly until she walked into the conference room for the weekly staff meeting.
We need to move forward
Saw
with this
Alex
now.
Chin sitting at the head of
Understood,
the
I'm
table,
on it.
wearing a sharp gray suit, and looking every inch the successful businessman she should have suspected he was. Their eyes met across the room, and Sarah felt her carefully constructed sense. Sarah felt her heart hammering against her ribs as Margaret's voice continued around her, introducing team members one by one. The sound seemed to come from underwater, distorted and distant. She watched Alex shake hands with her colleagues, his smile professional and warm, giving no indication that he recognized anyone in the room. When Margaret reached her name in the introductions, Sarah forced herself to step forward. "And this is Sarah Martinez, one of our most talented marketing specialists," Margaret said proudly. "Sarah handles our mid-tier accounts and has been instrumental in developing several successful campaigns this year." Alex extended his hand toward her with the same courteous demeanor he had shown everyone else. "Nice to meet you, Sarah," he said, his voice perfectly neutral. His hand felt exactly the same as it had 3 days ago when he had traced patterns on her bare shoulder, but now the touch lasted only the brief moment appropriate for a professional handshake. "Nice to meet you too," Sarah managed, proud that her voice came out steady despite the chaos in her mind. She searched his eyes for any sign of recognition, any acknowledgement of what they had shared, but found only polite professional interest. The rest of the meeting passed in a blur. Alex outlined his vision for the department, discussed upcoming projects, and answered questions with the easy confidence of someone who clearly knew what he was doing. Sarah tried to focus on his words, to process the information she would need to know for her job, but all she could think about was the way he had looked at her in the hotel room, the way he had listened to her talk about her dreams and fears, the way he had made her feel like the most fascinating woman in the world. Now he was acting like she was just another employee, just another face in the conference room. Sarah couldn't decide if she was angry, hurt, or impressed by his professionalism. Maybe all three. When the meeting ended, Sarah gathered her notebook and prepared to make a quick exit, hoping to avoid any awkward individual encounters. But as she reached the door, Alex's voice stopped her. "Sarah, could I have a word? I'd like to discuss the Henderson account since I understand you've been managing it." She turned back to find him standing by the conference table, his expression businesslike, but his eyes holding a flicker of something that might have been uncertainty. Margaret beamed with approval. "Perfect," she said. "Sarah, why don't you bring Alex up to speed on Henderson and any other mid-tier accounts that might benefit from his oversight?" Sarah nodded, not trusting herself to speak. She waited as the rest of the team filed out, leaving them alone in the conference room. The silence stretched between them until Alex moved to close the door. "We should probably talk," he said quietly, his professional facade dropping slightly. "Should we?" Sarah asked, surprised by the edge in her own voice. "Because you seemed pretty committed to pretending you've never seen me before." Alex ran a hand through his hair, the gesture achingly familiar from Friday night. "Sarah, I had no idea you worked here. When I took this job, HR gave me a list of team members, but it was just names and titles. No photos, no detailed backgrounds. So this is just a coincidence." Sarah tried to keep her voice level, but she could hear the disbelief creeping in. "A terrible coincidence," Alex confirmed. "Trust me, if I had known, I would have." He stopped, seeming to realize there was no good way to finish that sentence. "You would have what? Not taken the job? Not slept with me? I'm curious which one of those you consider the mistake." Alex winced. "That's not what I meant. I don't regret Friday night, Sarah. It was amazing. But this situation is impossible." Sarah felt a bitter laugh escape her. "Impossible? Right. Well, don't worry about it. I'm perfectly capable of keeping my personal and professional lives separate. I've been doing it successfully for years." "Have you?" Alex asked, and there was something in his tone that made her look at him more closely. "Because from what you told me Friday night, you've been living your whole life like it was your job. Maybe this is actually an opportunity." "An opportunity for what?" "To figure out what you really want instead of what you think you should want," he said, echoing his words from their night together. "Isn't that what you said you were trying to do?" The fact that he was using her own confessions against her made Sarah's cheeks burn with embarrassment and anger. "I was drunk on wine and good conversation." People say a lot of things in hotel rooms that they don't necessarily mean in the real world. "Do they?" Alex stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Because everything you told me felt incredibly real. Your frustration with playing it safe, your desire to figure out who you actually are instead of who everyone expects you to be. Did that all disappear because we're standing in a conference room instead of by a window overlooking the city?" Sarah felt her carefully constructed anger wavering. The problem was that he was right. Everything she had told him Friday night was true, and seeing him again had reminded her of how alive she had felt in his presence. But acknowledging that would mean acknowledging how much the weekend had affected her, how disappointed she had been to wake up alone, how much she had hoped their connection had been real. "It doesn't matter what I told you Friday night," she said finally. "What matters is that you're my boss now, and we have to find a way to work together professionally." Alex studied her for a long moment. "Is that really what you want? To pretend Friday night never happened?" The question hung in the air between them, loaded with possibility and danger. Sarah thought about the safe answer, the professional answer, the answer that would protect her job and her reputation. Then, she thought about the woman who had been brave enough to go upstairs with a stranger, who had finally felt like she was living her own life instead of just observing it. "What I want," she said carefully, "is to understand what this means for my career. Are you going to be able to work with me objectively, or is this going to affect my opportunities for advancement? Because I've worked too hard to build my reputation here to have it compromised by one night of poor judgment." The words came out harsher than she had intended, but Sarah saw Alex flinch as if she had slapped him. She immediately regretted characterizing their night together as poor judgment, but the words were already out there. "I see," Alex said, his voice cooling. "Well, let me assure you that your career will be evaluated solely on your professional performance. I'm perfectly capable of separating my personal and professional lives." "Good," Sarah said, though the word felt like sawdust in her mouth. "Then, we shouldn't have any problems." Alex nodded curtly. "In that case, why don't you walk me through the Henderson account? I'd like to understand what strategies you've been using and whether there are opportunities for expansion." For the next hour, they discussed Sarah's accounts with meticulous professionalism. Alex asked thoughtful questions and offered useful insights, demonstrating exactly why he had been hired for the position. Sarah found herself genuinely impressed by his understanding of marketing strategy and client psychology, which only made the situation more complicated. If he had been incompetent or difficult to work with, it would have been easier to write off Friday night as a mistake and move on. But Alex was clearly good at his job, and Their professional dynamic was as natural and easy as their personal connection had been. Sarah could see how much they could accomplish working together, which made the tension between them all the more frustrating. When they finished discussing her accounts, Alex gathered his notes and stood to leave. "Thank you for bringing me up to speed," he said formally. "I'll review your reports and let you know if I have any questions." "Of course," Sarah replied, equally formal. "I'm happy to provide any additional information you need." Alex paused at the door. "Sarah," he said quietly, not turning around. "For what it's worth, I didn't leave that morning because I wanted to. I had an early flight to catch, and you looked so peaceful sleeping that I didn't want to wake you. I thought about leaving a note, but anything I wrote seemed inadequate." Sarah felt her throat tighten. "You don't owe me an explanation." "Maybe not," Alex said, "but I wanted you to know anyway." After he left, Sarah sat alone in the conference room for several minutes, trying to process everything that had happened. She felt like she was living in some kind of romantic comedy nightmare, except there was nothing funny about the situation. She had finally taken a risk, finally done something spontaneous and exciting, and somehow it had blown up into the most complicated professional situation imaginable. The worst part was that seeing Alex again had reminded her of all the things she had liked about him. His intelligence, his humor, the way he made her feel heard and understood. Even in their tense conversation just now, there had been moments when she could see glimpses of the man who had made her feel brave enough to stay in his hotel room. Sarah's phone buzzed with a text from Emma. "How was your first day back? Still glowing from your mysterious Friday night adventure?" Sarah stared at the message for a long moment before typing back, "Definitely not glowing anymore. Call you later." She spent the rest of the day trying to focus on her work, but her concentration was shot. Every time someone mentioned Alex or asked about the new director, Sarah felt her stomach clench with anxiety. She found herself listening for his voice in the hallway, wondering if he was settling into his new office, if he was thinking about their conversation as much as she was. Around 4 o'clock, Margaret stopped by Sarah's desk with a pleased expression. "I'm so glad Alex is working out well," she said. "He seems very impressed with the quality of our team, especially with your work on the Henderson account." "He mentioned that?" Sarah asked, trying to keep her voice casual. "Oh yes, he was quite complimentary. Said you clearly have a deep understanding of client psychology and marketing strategy. He's looking forward to working with you on some of the larger accounts." Sarah forced a smile. "That's nice to hear. I think this could be a great opportunity for you, Sarah. Alex has connections throughout the industry, and if you impress him, it could really accelerate your career. You should definitely make an effort to get to know him better." The irony of Margaret's advice was almost too much to bear. Sarah nodded and made appropriate responses, but inside she was screaming. Get to know him better? She had already gotten to know him intimately, and look how that had turned out. That evening, Sarah met Emma for dinner at their usual place, a cozy Italian restaurant near Sarah's apartment. Emma took one look at her and immediately ordered a bottle of wine. "Okay, what happened?" Emma demanded. "You look like someone ran over your dog. I thought you were feeling all empowered and spontaneous after Friday night." Sarah buried her face in her hands. "Emma, I'm about to tell you something, and I need you to promise not to laugh or say I told you so, or make any jokes about romantic comedies. This sounds serious. Did something go wrong with that guy from the hotel? Did he turn out to be married or something?" "Worse," Sarah said. "He turned out to be my new boss." Emma's eyes widened. "What do you mean your new boss?" Sarah told her the whole story, from walking into the conference room that morning to their tense conversation afterward. Emma listened without interrupting, her expression shifting from shock to sympathy to barely suppressed amusement. "Okay," Emma said when Sarah finished. "This is definitely a situation. But maybe it's not as bad as you think." "How is it not as bad as I think?" "I slept with my boss, Emma. Before he was my boss, but still. This could completely derail my career if anyone finds out." "Who's going to find out?" "You said he's being completely professional about it." "That's the problem," Sarah said. "He's being so professional that it's like Friday night never happened. Like it meant nothing to him." Emma studied her friend's face. "And it meant something to you." It wasn't a question, and Sarah didn't bother trying to deny it. "I thought it did. I thought we had this amazing connection, that maybe it could turn into something real. But apparently I was just projecting. Or Emma suggested gently. Maybe he's trying to be professional because he feels just as confused and conflicted as you do. Think about it, Sarah. He just started a new job, and now he finds out that the woman he had an incredible night with works for him. That's got to be just as weird for him as it is for you. Sarah considered this. So what am I supposed to do? Ask him to grab coffee and discuss our feelings? That's not exactly appropriate workplace behavior. Maybe not, Emma agreed. But you could try actually talking to him instead of assuming the worst. You said yourself that he explained why he left that morning. That doesn't sound like someone who didn't care. Sarah poked at her pasta, her appetite gone. It doesn't matter anyway. Even if he did care, even if we both wanted to explore what happened Friday night, we can't. Not now. Not with him being my boss. Why not? Because it's inappropriate. Because it could affect my career. Because office romances are messy and complicated and usually end badly. All of that is true, Emma admitted. But it's also true that you've never looked as happy as you did when you were telling me about Friday night. And it's true that you've been complaining for years about how boring and predictable your life is. Now you have a chance to do something exciting and risky, and you're talking yourself out of it. This isn't exciting and risky, Emma. This is potentially career-ending and definitely stupid. Maybe, Emma said. Or maybe this is exactly the kind of chance you've been waiting for without realizing it. Maybe the universe is giving you an opportunity to figure out what you really want, just like that guy said. Sarah looked at her best friend, frustrated by how much sense she was making. Since when are you the voice of reason about taking romantic risks? Since I watched my best friend come alive for the first time in years after one night with a stranger, Emma said simply. I've never seen you like that before, Sarah. Not even with Derek. You were glowing. You were confident. You were yourself. Your real self, not the version you think you should be. Sarah felt tears prick her eyes. Emma was right, and that was what made the whole situation so painful. Friday night hadn't just been about great sex or good conversation. It had been about feeling like she was finally living her own life instead of just going through the motions. Seeing Alex again, being forced back into professional mode, felt like returning to a smaller version of herself. What if I try to talk to him, and it makes everything worse? Sarah asked. What if he thinks I'm being unprofessional or trying to leverage our personal connection for career advancement? What if you don't try to talk to him and spend the rest of your life wondering what might have happened? Emma countered. You can't control what he thinks or how he reacts. You can only control what you do. Sarah sat back in her chair, feeling the weight of the decision pressing down on her. She could play it safe, maintain professional boundaries, and try to forget that Friday night had ever happened. It was the sensible choice, the one that protected her career and her reputation. Or she could take another risk, have an honest conversation with Alex, and see if the connection they had shared was strong enough to figure out a way forward. It was terrifying and potentially disastrous, but it was also the only way to find out if Friday night had been the beginning of something real or just a beautiful mistake. I need to think about it, Sarah said finally. Fair enough, Emma replied. But don't think too long. Some opportunities don't wait around for us to feel ready. That night, Sarah lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment of her interactions with Alex. The way he had looked at her in the hotel bar, the sound of his laugh, the gentle way he had touched her face. Then, the professional mask he had worn in the conference room, the careful distance he had maintained, the way he had said her name like she was just another colleague. Both versions were real, she realized. The passionate, thoughtful man from Friday night, and the competent, professional director from Monday morning. The question was whether there was a way to bridge those two realities, or if they were destined to exist in separate worlds. Sarah thought about Emma's words about some opportunities not waiting around. She thought about the woman who had been brave enough to stay in that hotel room, who had finally felt like she was living instead of just existing. That woman wouldn't spend weeks agonizing over the perfect approach or waiting for someone else to make the first move. That woman would figure out a way to have the conversation that needed to happen, regardless of how scary it might be. Sarah picked up her phone and began typing a text message to Alex. She deleted it and started over 3 times before finally settling on something simple. We should talk. Not about work. Are you free for coffee tomorrow after hours? Sarah arrived at the daily grind 15 minutes early, partly because she had left work as soon as the clock hit 5:30, and partly because she wanted to choose where they would sit. She selected a corner table that offered privacy while still being public enough to maintain appropriate boundaries. Her hands shook slightly as she ordered a latte, and she had to resist the urge to check her appearance in her phone's camera for the third time. She had spent the entire day second-guessing her decision to reach out to Alex. During lunch, she had almost texted him to cancel, convinced that she was about to make a fool of herself. But every time she started to type an excuse, she remembered Emma's words about opportunities not waiting around, and she forced herself to put her phone away. Now, sitting in the cozy cafe with its exposed brick walls and the scent of fresh coffee in the air, Sarah tried to organize her thoughts. What exactly did she want to say to Alex? What did she hope to accomplish with this conversation? She had been so focused on working up the courage to suggest meeting that she hadn't fully thought through her objectives. Alex walked through the door at exactly 6 o'clock, scanning the room until his eyes found hers. He looked different out of his business attire, wearing dark jeans and a gray sweater that made his eyes look even bluer than she remembered. For a moment, seeing him approach her table, Sarah was transported back to Friday night, and the way he had looked walking toward her in the hotel bar. "Hi," he said, sliding into the chair across from her. "Thank you for suggesting this." "Thank you for agreeing to come," Sarah replied. "I wasn't sure you would." Alex smiled slightly, the first genuinely relaxed expression she had seen from him since Monday morning. "I have to admit, I was hoping you would reach out. I've been thinking about our conversation yesterday, and I don't think we really resolved anything." Sarah felt some of her nervous tension ease. At least he seemed willing to have an honest discussion. "I've been thinking about it too, and I realized that I owe you an apology." "For what?" "For calling Friday night poor judgment." "It wasn't, and I shouldn't have said that just because I was feeling defensive." Alex's expression softened. "You don't need to apologize for that. This situation is complicated, and I understand why you felt the need to put up walls." "Is it complicated?" Sarah asked. "Or are we making it more complicated than it needs to be?" Alex was quiet for a moment, considering the question. "I think," he said carefully, "that depends on what we both want and whether those things are compatible with working together." "Okay," Sarah said, taking a deep breath. "Then, maybe we should talk about what we want." "You first," Alex said, and there was something in his tone that reminded her of their conversation in the hotel room, the way he had encouraged her to be honest about her feelings and desires. Sarah wrapped her hands around her coffee mug, using the warmth to steady herself. "I want to understand what Friday night was for you. Because for me, it wasn't just about the physical attraction, though that was definitely there. It was about feeling like someone really saw me, like I could be completely myself without having to filter or perform or worry about whether I was being the person I thought I should be." Alex nodded slowly. "It was the same for me. I've been traveling for work for the past few months, staying in hotels, meeting new people every day, but never really connecting with anyone. That night with you was the first time in a long time that I felt like I was having a real conversation with someone who understood what I was going through." "So it wasn't just a one-night stand for you either?" "No," Alex said firmly. "It wasn't. If circumstances were different, if I wasn't your boss, I would have asked you out properly. I would have wanted to see where this could go." Sarah felt a mix of relief and frustration. Relief that her instincts about their connection had been correct, and frustration that they were in a situation that made exploring that connection so complicated. "But circumstances aren't different," she said. "You are my boss, and that creates a power imbalance that makes any romantic relationship problematic." "It does," Alex agreed. "But I keep wondering if that's a reason to give up without trying to find a solution, or just an obstacle we need to figure out how to navigate." Sarah looked at him across the table, this man who had somehow become both the source of her newfound confidence and her biggest professional dilemma. "What kind of solution did you have in mind?" "I don't know yet," Alex admitted. "But I do know that pretending Friday night never happened isn't working for either of us. Yesterday in that conference room, I could barely concentrate on what you were saying about the Henderson account because I kept thinking about our conversation by the hotel window. You seemed completely professional to me. I'm good at compartmentalizing when I need to be," Alex said. "But that doesn't mean it's easy or sustainable." I find myself looking forward to meetings with you for reasons that have nothing to do with work, and that's not fair to you or to the rest of the team. Sarah appreciated his honesty, but it also highlighted the fundamental problem they were facing. So what do we do? We can't exactly ask HR for advice on this situation. Alex laughed, and the sound was warm and familiar. No, I don't think. I slept with an employee before I knew she was an employee is covered in the standard workplace guidelines. It's not funny, Sarah protested, but she was fighting a smile herself. It's a little funny, Alex said, in a cosmic joke kind of way. I finally meet someone I have a real connection with, and it turns out she works for me. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, both contemplating the absurdity of their situation. Sarah found herself studying Alex's face, noting the way his eyes crinkled slightly when he smiled, the small scar above his left eyebrow that she had noticed Friday night, but hadn't asked about. "Can I ask you something?" she said finally. "Of course. Why did you take this job? I mean, what made you decide to leave Seattle and come here?" Alex considered the question. "Honestly, I was stuck in a rut. I had a good job, a nice apartment, a predictable life. But I felt like I was sleepwalking through it all. When this opportunity came up, it felt like a chance to start fresh, to challenge myself in a new environment." "That sounds familiar," Sarah said wryly. "I thought it might. It's part of why I was drawn to you Friday night. You were asking yourself the same questions I had been asking myself." Sarah felt a flutter of the same connection she had felt at the hotel bar. Even in this complicated situation, talking to Alex felt natural and easy. She could imagine having conversations like this for months, years, learning more about his thoughts and experiences, sharing her own hopes and fears. "I have an idea," she said suddenly. "It might be completely crazy, but hear me out." Alex leaned forward, interested. "I'm listening. What if we tried to separate the personal and professional completely? What if we agreed to maintain strict boundaries at work, but explore whatever this is outside of the office? Like dating in secret?" "Not exactly dating," Sarah said, though she wasn't entirely sure what she meant by that. "More like getting to know each other as people, without the complication of work hierarchy. We could meet for coffee, go to movies, have dinner. Just two adults who are attracted to each other and want to see if there's something real here." Alex was quiet for a long moment, and Sarah began to worry that she had overstepped or suggested something he wasn't comfortable with. "It could work," he said finally. "But it would require a lot of discipline from both of us. We would have to be completely professional at work, no matter what was happening between us personally. No special treatment, no insider information, no letting our personal relationship affect professional decisions." "I could do that," Sarah said, though she wasn't entirely sure it was true. "Could you?" "I think so. But there would have to be complete honesty between us about how it was affecting our work dynamic. If either of us felt like the personal relationship was compromising our professional judgment, we would have to be willing to address it immediately." Sarah nodded. "And if we decided it wasn't working, we would have to be mature enough to end the personal relationship while maintaining a good working relationship." "That's a lot of hypothetical maturity for two people who are clearly attracted to each other," Alex pointed out. "True," Sarah admitted. "But we're both adults. We should be able to handle this responsibly." Alex smiled. "Should be and actually doing it are two different things. But I'm willing to try if you are." Sarah felt a rush of excitement mixed with terror. "Really? Really? But I think we need to establish some ground rules first." They spent the next hour outlining the boundaries of their arrangement. No personal conversations at work beyond what would be normal between any colleagues. No public displays of affection or even excessive friendliness in professional settings. Complete discretion about their personal relationship from everyone at work. Regular check-ins to make sure the arrangement wasn't affecting their professional dynamic. "This is either going to be the most mature decision we've ever made, or the most spectacular mistake," Sarah said as they prepared to leave the cafe. "Probably both," Alex agreed. "But I'd rather try and fail than spend the rest of my time here wondering what might have happened." They walked out of the cafe together, and for the first time since Monday morning, Sarah felt hopeful about the situation. It wasn't a perfect solution, and there were probably a dozen ways it could go wrong, but at least they were being honest with each other about what they wanted. So, Alex said as they reached the corner where they would part ways to go to their respective apartments. Would you like to have dinner Friday night? Somewhere far from the office where we can just be two people getting to know each other. I'd like that, Sarah said, and meant it. Alex stepped closer, and for a moment Sarah thought he might kiss her. Instead, he reached out and briefly touched her hand, a simple gesture that somehow felt more intimate than a kiss would have in that public setting. I'll text you the details, he said. And Sarah, thank you for being brave enough to suggest this conversation. I know it wasn't easy. Sarah watched him walk away, feeling like she was standing at the beginning of something entirely new and uncertain. She had no idea if their plan would work, if they could really maintain the boundaries they had agreed on, or if their connection was strong enough to survive the complications they were creating. But, for the first time since Monday morning, she felt like herself again. The woman who had been brave enough to stay in that hotel room, who had decided to take control of her own story instead of letting life happen to her. Whatever came next, at least she would be an active participant in her own life rather than just an observer. The next few days at work were a careful dance of professional courtesy and hidden undercurrents. Sarah found herself hyper-aware of every interaction with Alex, analyzing every word and gesture for signs that their personal arrangement was affecting their professional dynamic. Alex seemed equally cautious, maintaining perfect professionalism while occasionally catching her eye in meetings with an expression that reminded her of their conversation at the cafe. On Thursday morning, Margaret called Sarah into her office to discuss a potential new client. Alex mentioned that you might be the right person to lead the pitch for the Morrison Group, she said. It's a significant account, and it would be a great opportunity for you to show what you can do with a larger budget and scope. Sarah felt a moment of panic. Was this the special treatment they had promised to avoid? But, as Margaret outlined the project, it became clear that it genuinely was a good fit for Sarah's skills and experience. Alex wasn't giving her opportunities she didn't deserve. He was recognizing her professional abilities in the same way he would for any qualified team member. I'd love to work on it, Sarah said. When would you need the initial proposal? Alex wants to see a preliminary presentation Monday morning. Think you can put something together by then? Sarah nodded, already mentally organizing her approach to the project. As she left Margaret's office, she felt a surge of professional excitement that had nothing to do with her personal situation with Alex. This was exactly the kind of challenging, high-profile project she had been hoping for, and she was determined to prove that she deserved it on her own merits. That afternoon, Alex stopped by her desk to discuss the Morrison Group project. To anyone observing, it would have looked like a normal supervisor checking in with a team member about an important assignment. But Sarah could see the slight tension in his shoulders, the way he was being careful not to stand too close or make eye contact for too long. Do you have everything you need to get started? He asked. I think so, Sarah replied. I'll have some questions as I dig into their background and requirements, but I should be able to put together a solid preliminary presentation. Great. If you need any additional resources or support, just let me know. It was a perfectly appropriate exchange, but as Alex turned to leave, Sarah found herself watching the way he moved, remembering the feeling of his hands on her skin. She forced herself to look back at her computer screen, reminding herself of the boundaries they had agreed on. Friday evening couldn't come fast enough. Alex had chosen a small French restaurant in a neighborhood neither of them frequented, ensuring they wouldn't run into anyone from work. Sarah arrived first and was seated at a table by the window, watching the street life outside while she waited. When Alex appeared in the doorway, her heart did the same little flip it had done in the hotel bar 2 weeks earlier. He was wearing dark jeans and a blue button-down shirt that brought out his eyes, and when he smiled at her across the restaurant, Sarah felt like they were finally able to drop the careful masks they had been wearing all week. Hi, he said, settling into the chair across from her. How was your week? Strange, Sarah admitted. I kept forgetting that we're supposed to be getting to know each other. At work, I find myself thinking I already know you, and then I remember that we've actually only had 2 real conversations. I know what you mean, Alex said. There's this weird disconnect between feeling like I understand you and realizing how much I don't actually know about your life. They ordered wine and began the delicate process of getting to know each other properly. Sarah learned that Alex had grown up in a family of engineers, but had rebelled by studying business instead. He had traveled extensively for his previous job, which was how he had developed his love of trying new foods and experiencing different cultures. He was an only child who was close to his parents, but felt pressure to live up to their expectations. Alex learned that Sarah came from a large, loud family where she had often felt overlooked as the middle child. She had studied marketing because she was good with people and creative problem solving, but had sometimes wondered if she should have pursued something more artistic. She loved to read, especially historical fiction, and had always dreamed of traveling to the places she read about. "What's the most interesting place you've been?" Sarah asked as they shared a dessert. "Probably Thailand," Alex said. "Not just because of the scenery, though that was incredible, but because it was the first time I traveled somewhere completely alone, without any work obligations or scheduled activities. I just wandered around, talked to locals, tried whatever food looked interesting. It was the first time I felt like I was living spontaneously instead of according to some predetermined plan." "That sounds amazing," Sarah said wistfully. "I've always wanted to do something like that, but I've never been brave enough." "What would stop you?" Sarah considered the question. "Fear, mostly. Fear of being alone in a foreign place, fear of not speaking the language, fear of making mistakes or getting lost. All of those things might happen," Alex said gently, "but they might also lead to the best parts of the experience. Some of my favorite travel memories are from times when things didn't go according to plan." Sarah smiled. "You sound like Emma. She's always trying to convince me to be more adventurous." "Emma sounds smart. What does she think about this situation with us?" Sarah hesitated, realizing they hadn't discussed whether their arrangement included telling friends about their personal relationship. "She knows about Friday night, obviously, and she knows that you turned out to be my boss. But I haven't told her about our decision to try dating outside of work." "Are you planning to tell her?" "I don't know. It feels like the kind of secret that would be hard to keep from your best friend, but it also feels like the kind of information that could be dangerous if it got out." Alex nodded thoughtfully. "I haven't told anyone either. But you're right that it might be hard to maintain complete secrecy, especially if this develops into something more serious." The implication of his words hung in the air between them. Something more serious. The possibility that their arrangement might evolve beyond secret dinners and careful workplace boundaries. "Is that what you're hoping for?" Sarah asked quietly. "Something more serious?" Alex met her eyes directly. "I'm hoping for the chance to find out what this could become without the pressure of making long-term decisions right now." "Are you?" "Yes," Sarah said, and realized she meant it completely. "I want to see where this goes, even if it's complicated and risky and potentially disastrous." Alex reached across the table and took her hand, the first time they had touched since their handshake in the conference room on Monday. "Then, let's see where it goes." They walked slowly back toward their cars after dinner, neither of them ready for the evening to end. The night was warm, and the streets were busy with other couples and groups of friends enjoying their Friday evening. Sarah felt like she was part of that world in a way she hadn't in months, like she was living her life instead of just getting through it. "I have a confession," Alex said as they reached Sarah's car. "I've been looking forward to tonight all week. Not just because I wanted to see you, but because I wanted to feel like myself again instead of just playing the role of your boss." "I know exactly what you mean," Sarah said. "It's exhausting being so careful all the time, measuring every word and gesture." Alex stepped closer, and Sarah could smell his cologne, the same scent that had lingered in the hotel room. "Can I kiss you?" he asked quietly. Instead of answering, Sarah rose up on her toes and kissed him herself. It was soft and sweet at first, then deeper as they both relaxed into the moment. When they finally separated, Sarah felt dizzy with relief and desire. "I've wanted to do that since Monday morning," she admitted. "Just since Monday?" Alex asked with a smile. "I've been wanting to do that since I woke up alone in that hotel room." They stood together in the warm evening air, holding hands like teenagers, both of them grinning slightly at the absurdity and excitement of their situation. "So," Sarah said finally, "same time next week?" "Definitely," Alex replied. "Though I should warn you, this is going to be torture, seeing you every day at work and having to pretend I'm not thinking about kissing you." "Good thing we're both professionals," Sarah said with a laugh. As she drove home, Sarah felt lighter than she had in weeks. Their plan was working, at least so far. They had managed to have a wonderful evening together without letting it affect their professional relationship. Maybe they really could navigate this impossible situation after all. Her phone buzzed with a text from Alex. "Thank you for a perfect evening. Sweet dreams." Sarah smiled as she typed back. "Thank you for being worth the risk." She fell asleep that night feeling optimistic about the future for the first time since Derek had broken up with her. Whatever happened next, she was finally taking control of her own story, making choices based on what she wanted rather than what she thought she should want. It felt like the beginning of everything. She hit send before she could change her mind, then immediately regretted it. What if he said no? What if he reported her to HR for inappropriate behavior? What if she had just made the biggest mistake of her professional life? Her phone buzzed almost immediately with his response. "Yes. There's a cafe called The Daily Grind 3 blocks from the office. 6 p.m. Sarah stared at the message, her heart racing. There was no going back now. Tomorrow evening, she would have to find the courage to have one of the most difficult conversations of her life. She would have to risk everything she had built professionally for the chance to find out if what they had shared was worth fighting for. She typed back a quick "see you there" and set her phone aside. Tomorrow, she would find out if she was brave enough to live the kind of life she had only dreamed about, or if she would retreat back into the safety of professional boundaries and predictable choices. Either way, she was finally taking control of her own story. Aiden's crumble. Alex's expression flickered with surprise and something that might have been dismay before settling into professional neutrality. "Everyone," said Sarah's boss, Margaret, clapping her hands to get the room's attention. "I'd like you to meet Alex Chun, our new director of business development. He'll be leading the team and overseeing several major accounts. Alex, these are the key players you'll be working with." Sarah stood frozen in the doorway as the implications of the situation crashed over her. The man she had spent Friday night with, the man she had been naked with just 60 hours ago, was now her boss. Her boss, who was looking at her with the same professional courtesy he was showing everyone else, as if they had never met. As Margaret began introducing the staff members one by one, Sarah realized she had exactly 30 seconds to figure out how to handle this situation. 30 seconds to decide whether to acknowledge their previous meeting or pretend, like Alex apparently was, that Friday night had never happened. 30 seconds to figure out how her spontaneous night of passion had somehow turned into the most complicated professional situation of her life.